They say the people closest to you can't truly hurt you unless you let them in. I let them in. I trusted them with my home, my health, my future, and they nearly destroyed all three. But I didn't break. I uncovered every lie, every secret. And what happened next changed everything. Let me tell you what really happened. I was sitting in the sunlit breakfast room of a Georgian-style estate in Savannah, where my sister-in-law Camille hosted the family's monthly brunch. The morning air was crisp, the windows open just enough for a breeze to stir the embroidered curtains. The table was perfectly arranged, white linen, antique silver, and champagne flutes catching the light like crystal prisms. Everything looked beautiful. Serene, even. If only I weren't staring at the coffee cup in front of me, debating whether or not to bring it to my lips. I made it myself, Brynn, my husband Adrian said cheerfully, placing the cup down with exaggerated care. His tone was light but his gaze chilled me. Tried something new for you. Thought you'd appreciate the effort. The smell hit me the second it touched the table. Something was wrong. Not just off wrong. The scent was heavy, slightly metallic, with an underlying warmth that didn't belong to any coffee I'd ever tasted. A shiver crawled down my spine. Camille sat directly across from me, casually stirring her espresso. Her eyes never left mine. Her expression was placid, too placid, as if she were waiting for a cue or watching for a reaction. I forced a smile. Adrian, you know I prefer iced coffee, right? I said lightly, letting my fingers rest on the porcelain cup without lifting it. Kind of a tradition at these brunches. He shrugged. Felt like shaking things up today. Camille and I already tried it. Tastes great. Is that so? I glanced toward Camille. Her face gave away nothing but that smooth, practiced smile. She gave a tiny nod and set her cup down. She didn't take another sip. It was a familiar act. After 3 years of marriage, I'd learned to read Camille's signals, too perfectly timed to be genuine. I'd also learned to be suspicious. I'd been hospitalized 3 times after meals at Camille's house, always something vague. Allergic reaction. Gastroenteritis. Once severe dehydration. Nothing the doctors could conclusively trace. Adrian always had an explanation. Your stomach's too sensitive, or maybe it was the seafood. Camille always appeared worried, sent flowers, offered to help, but never visited. Never once came to the ER. After the detox tea she'd given me last fall that nearly made me miss the Hastings pitch meeting, I stopped believing in coincidence. I stared at the coffee. What were you two working on so late last night? I asked casually, my voice steady despite the pounding in my chest. Adrian blinked. Huh? Oh, your birthday surprise. We wanted it to be special. He smiled again, but this one was slower, less certain. Special, I repeated, setting the cup aside and pretending to search my purse for my phone. Well, I'm definitely surprised. I scanned the table. 3 cups, 1 for me, 1 for Adrian, 1 for Camille. Only mine remained untouched. I could feel the air shift around us as the silence deepened. Camille rested her chin on her hand, the corners of her mouth twitching into something resembling concern. You've looked worn out lately, Brynn. Are you sleeping enough? Not really, I said, eyes lowering to the gleaming marble floor. Maybe I just need my coffee. I picked up the cup and lifted it to my lips. I didn't drink. I faked a sip, letting the ceramic touch my mouth as I kept my eyes trained on both of them. They exchanged a quick glance. Barely perceptible. But I saw it. I felt it. Something was happening. Something they didn't expect me to notice. And if I wasn't careful, this cup might be the reason I never noticed anything again. I stood abruptly, phone in hand, feigning urgency. Excuse me, I said. My assistant just texted. I'll need to take this. Can I use your office, Camille? She didn't hesitate. Of course, she replied, though her eyes never left me. As I passed her chair, I let myself stumble just slightly. Oh. Sorry, I exclaimed, brushing the edge of the tablecloth and nudging the cups ever so slightly. While straightening them, I made the switch. My cup for hers. It took less than a second. Camille raised an eyebrow but said nothing. I walked to the office with steady steps, heart pounding like a war drum. I left the door cracked just enough to see the table. 10 seconds later, Camille lifted what she thought was her coffee and drank. And I waited. Because this time I was the one watching them. They traded a glance, fleeting, but sharp enough to send a fresh spike of dread through my chest. There was something happening between them, something unspoken but undeniable. And if I wasn't careful, that steaming cup could be the last thing I ever tasted. I didn't wait for a better moment. Standing up with my phone in hand, I forced a slight gasp. Oh, sorry. I think my assistant just messaged me, I said with practiced urgency. Would it be okay if I stepped into your office for a minute, Camille? Camille's smile didn't move, but her eyes stayed locked on me. Of course, she said smoothly. First door on the right. I turned toward the hallway, heart thudding hard. As I passed her chair, I allowed my purse to bump the edge of the table, just enough to rattle the cups and send a spoon spinning gently onto the tablecloth. Oh, so clumsy of me, I murmured, leaning over to fix the silverware, adjusting the placemats as I moved. My right hand hovered just long enough to switch her untouched espresso with my own cursed cup. One small, fluid motion. No one would have noticed unless they were watching for it, and I was fairly certain neither of them believed I had the nerve. Camille's eyes narrowed ever so slightly, but she said nothing. I walked down the hallway, stepped into the study, and left the door cracked open a few inches. From that narrow view, I could still see the edge of the dining table. I tapped my phone screen and quietly began recording. If this story has you holding your breath, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss what happens next. There's more betrayal, more twists, and trust me, it only gets more intense from here. Stay with me. Adrian sat scrolling on his phone, legs crossed. Camille reached for what she thought was her own cup, paused briefly, then took a slow sip. I held my breath. 5 seconds. 10. She took another sip. Doubt crept into the corners of my mind. Had I been wrong? Had I imagined the scent, the metallic note, the tremor in Adrian's voice? And then Camille's fingers stiffened around the cup. She set it down with a shaky clink, her lips twitching as she inhaled sharply. Her hand went to her throat. A moment later, the other gripped the armrest of her chair. Her knuckles turned white. Adrian looked up. Camille? My throat, it's burning, she croaked. Her eyes were wide now, panicked. Adrian, there's something in that coffee. I stepped from the doorway, phone still recording. Something wrong, Camille? My voice was calm. Ice cold. My gaze slid to Adrian. She doesn't look well. Camille's face was losing color fast. She reached toward Adrian with a trembling hand. You said just drowsy. Not like this. I walked closer. Just drowsy. I said evenly. What exactly did he say to you, Camille? Adrian was frozen, eyes darting from her to me. His mouth opened, but no sound came out. This wasn't supposed to happen, he stammered. That wasn't her cup, No, I cut in, pulling the phone from my coat pocket. It wasn't. But you both knew it would be mine. I lifted the screen toward them. I've been recording since the moment I left the table. Including everything she just said about your little plan to make me tired. Camille bent forward suddenly, gasping, clutching her abdomen. Help, she rasped. It hurts. Adrian lunged for his phone. I'm calling. I didn't know. She wasn't supposed to drink it. I pulled out my own phone and dialed. Yes, this is Brynn Collins. I need an ambulance sent to 92, Grayson Court, Savannah. My sister-in-law is having a severe reaction. Shaking, vomiting, loss of muscle control. I gave the address and hung up without another word. Camille crumpled to the floor, groaning. Adrian knelt beside her, helpless and pale. The mask had fallen. You switched it, Camille whispered, eyes glassy as she looked up at me. You knew. I crouched, just out of reach, locking eyes with her. After 3 emergency rooms in 6 months? I said. You thought I wouldn't? 3 ER visits in 6 months, Camille, I said quietly. You really thought I wouldn't catch on? The omelet at my birthday brunch, that detox tea before the Pulaski pitch, and now this coffee stunt. Before she could respond, the sound of rushing footsteps filled the room. The front door flew open and paramedics entered, their voices clipped and professional. I stepped aside, giving them room to assess Camille, who now lay limp, groaning on the polished hardwood floor. Adrian hovered nearby, white-knuckled and useless. You did this with her, I said to him, my voice barely audible over the rising chaos. Because I landed the Covington contract? That's what pushed you this far. He didn't answer. His lips parted, but nothing came out. Sweat beaded at his temples as Camille whimpered and clutched her side. One of the paramedics turned toward me. Are you family? She's my sister-in-law, I said. I'll ride with her. He nodded, waving me forward. As I started moving, Adrian reached for my arm. Brynn, wait. You don't understand. This isn't what it looks like. I stepped back, wrenching free from his grip. My voice came out like ice. Then explain how you knew it wasn't your sister's cup before she ever said a word. His face paled, lips twisting in a grimace. But he didn't deny it. I left the house without another glance, the early sun slanting through the oak-lined street like a spotlight cutting through darkness. The illusion was broken now. There was no going back. At the hospital, I sat alone in the ER waiting room at Memorial South in downtown Savannah, staring at the half-closed door across the hall. Camille was behind it, likely being pumped with fluids and stabilized. Adrian? Gone. He'd slipped away the moment the gurney disappeared through the emergency entrance. No calls. No texts. Just vanished. I pressed my palm against my leg to calm the tremor running through it. In my purse, the phone was still recording. Every word, every sickly sweet lie, every whispered confession. Most importantly, Adrian's voice. That wasn't her. The door across from me creaked open. A woman in a white coat stepped into the waiting area, her expression grim but composed. Miss Collins. I stood. Yes. She's stable, the doctor said. Still weak, but no longer in immediate danger. We found traces of a compound in her system, not something available over the counter. It's used in limited clinical testing, not something you'd find in a pharmacy. So it was deliberate, I murmured. And dangerous. The doctor nodded. If you had ingested the amount we detected, the outcome would likely have been far more severe. A mix of fury and dread bloomed in my chest. I'd like to file a report with the police. We've already contacted them, she said gently. An officer is on the way. In the meantime, Camille asked to speak with you. I nodded once, the motion stiff. The hallway was quiet, too clean and too bright. I stepped through the door to Camille's room and found her hooked up to an 4, eyes half-lidded and fixed on the ceiling tiles. She turned her head slowly when she saw me. I didn't think you'd come, she whispered, voice rasping. I stood at the foot of her bed. After everything? After you nearly killed me a 4th time? I came to look you in the eye. For the last time. Camille's mouth twitched, her breath shallow. Her face was pale, sweat clinging to her brow. I didn't want this, she murmured. And yet, here we were. It wasn't supposed to be dangerous, Camille muttered, her voice a threadbare whisper. Just enough to make you rest. Take a break for once. Rest. I repeated, stepping closer, the bitterness sharp in my voice. You mean miss the Covington pitch so you and Adrian could take credit? That kind of rest. She flinched, eyes closing as if she could block out the weight of the truth now hanging between us. Adrian said if you missed the meeting, the board would have no choice but to shift it to us, she said. He said you were burning out. That the company needed new voices. And the allergy scare in March? I asked, even though I already knew the answer deep down. I made the tea, she admitted. Just enough antihistamine to make you dizzy. He added something to those muffins for your birthday. Called it a mild boost. My stomach twisted. I pulled a chair up beside her bed and sat down, folding my hands tightly to keep from shaking. Why would you do this, Camille? I never tried to take anything from you. I worked. That's all. I worked hard. I stayed late. I gave you full credit on the Horizon account last year when you needed it. Camille exhaled slowly, her voice barely audible. That's the thing, Brynn. You made it all look easy. Clients loved you. You walked in and suddenly you were the face of the firm. I'd been there over 10 years. No one even noticed when I spoke. There was no justification strong enough for what she had done. But under the sterile hospital light, I didn't see a villain. I saw someone hollowed out by envy, warped by comparison, and lost in the shadow of someone she once welcomed into her family. And Adrian? I asked, my tone sharpening. He's supposed to protect me. I'm his wife. Camille's mouth curved into a faint, exhausted smirk. Adrian's never protected anyone but himself. Once you started landing deals he couldn't, he changed. Covington. Norvale. All of them went to you. He hated that. The door opened before I could respond. A uniformed officer entered, flanked by a nurse with a clipboard. Camille Renner, the officer said, voice steady but firm. We need you to cooperate in an ongoing investigation related to a suspected attempt to harm another individual. Camille nodded. She didn't protest. She didn't plead. As they helped her into a wheelchair and began preparations to transport her for questioning, she turned to look at me one last time. Brynn, she said, eyes sunken and voice ragged. Be careful who you trust. Even the ones you share a bed with. That sentence hit harder than anything else she'd confessed. It carved itself deep into my mind. I stood still as they rolled her away. Outside, a soft drizzle had begun to fall. I sat in the parking lot for a long time, hands gripping the wheel, listening to the faint tapping of rain on the roof. Her words repeated in my head, even the ones you share a bed with. I knew it wasn't over. Not yet. Before I left the hospital, I forwarded the full recording from the brunch to my attorney, Simon Barrett, a former colleague from a trade litigation case and one of the sharpest legal minds I knew. Discreet. Strategic. He called back less than 10 minutes later, his voice calm and crisp. Brynn, he said, this is solid. This is the first piece we need to build a real case. But I'll need more, Simon said through the phone. Something to prove this wasn't a one-off attempt. We need a pattern. I stared down at the screen, then slowly reached for the backup phone I kept tucked away in the bottom drawer of my bedroom vanity. I had hidden it there months ago, under the pretense of cleaning out old electronics, but it had become my insurance policy. Inside was a collection I'd built over 4 long, isolating months. Voice memos. Screenshots. A digital paper trail of every time I'd felt that crawling sense of danger, every time Adrian or Camille offered a drink with too much insistence or a meal they'd just whipped up. It all started in February when I collapsed during a late afternoon strategy session. I was scheduled to present a new campaign blueprint to the Forrester board, the kind of meeting that could fast-track a career. I never made it through the second slide. Dizzy, breathless, then unconscious. Adrian had stepped in, told the team I'd worked myself too hard, and presented the rest using my exact slide deck. The follow-up report listed him as the project lead. When I confronted him about it, he said it was a clerical error. That night, while unpacking my lunch bag, I noticed a small, unmarked sugar packet buried at the bottom. I'd never seen it before. That was the moment something shifted inside me. I didn't confront him. I started collecting. I opened a locked folder I had named Palladium. It contained 17 voice memos recorded in quiet moments, phone calls between Adrian and Camille, snippets of whispers in the hallway when they thought I was asleep, screenshots of vague but telling texts. Add just enough to slow her down, Camille had written once. Not like last time. And most chilling of all, a timeline. Dates, symptoms, who prepared the food or drink, which meetings I missed or arrived late to. A near-forensic breakdown of 4 months of subtle sabotage, written like a military briefing. I attached the folder to a secure email and sent it to Simon with a note. I'm done hiding. I'm ready to burn this down. Within 30 minutes, my phone buzzed. Simon's voice was clear, almost too calm. Brynn, this is no longer just personal. It's coordinated. Calculated. I'm bringing in a forensic investigator. But I need you to stay composed and under the radar. Don't tip Adrian off. I gave a small nod even though he couldn't see it. Understood. I drove back to the house Adrian and I shared on Azalea Ridge. The kind of quiet street lined with live oaks and old wraparound porches that fooled you into thinking life there was slow and safe. It wasn't. I parked and didn't go in immediately. Instead, I played one of the clearest recordings I had, captured just 3 weeks ago from the hallway outside our bedroom. Adrian was on the phone with Camille, thinking I was asleep. She's too damn resilient, he whispered. Last time, she shook it off and still closed that 10-bridge deal. Camille responded flat and cold. If she misses the Ridgemont launch, they'll give it to us. You just have to make sure she doesn't show up. They want reliability, not someone who's in and out of the ER. I paused the playback. My chest tightened. Inside, Adrian was lounging on the couch with a glass of red wine, legs crossed like he didn't have a care in the world. You're home, he said casually. How's Camille? I didn't answer. I walked past him straight into the study and locked the door behind me. On the desk sat a folder with our most recent contract from Waverly and Company. A deal valued at just under $9 million. My name was listed as lead strategist. Adrian had lobbied hard to take point. He was denied. Now I understood why he hadn't taken it well. The rage churned deep in my chest, but I couldn't afford to let it steer me. Not now. I forced my breathing steady, opened my laptop and turned on the webcam. The soft blue recording light blinked on as I stared directly into the lens. My face was composed. My voice steady. My name is Brynn Collins, I began. Over the past 6 months, I've been deliberately poisoned multiple times by my husband Adrian Collins and my sister-in-law Camille Renner. I paused only long enough to let the words settle. Their goal was to impair my ability to perform at work, force me to miss crucial meetings, and redirect valuable contracts to themselves. They used compounds not approved for consumer use, with the intent to weaken me physically while maintaining plausible deniability. I finished the recording and saved it to a flash drive under the name Final Proof, July 12th. When I stepped out of the study, Adrian was standing at the end of the hall, arms folded, eyes calculating. You okay? He asked too casually. I offered a smile. I'm fine, but I think we should talk to a lawyer. His jaw twitched. Just slightly, but enough. He was already planning his exit. He always thought 3 moves ahead. Unfortunately for him, so did I. The next morning, I returned to Memorial South Hospital in downtown Savannah. I carried a sealed manila folder with everything Simon Barrett, my attorney, had asked for. Digital logs, backup voice memos, and a hard copy of my medical history. The video statement was stored on 2 separate drives. The police were already there when I arrived. Detective Maria Ellison met me in the administrative conference room, along with 2 officers and the attending ER physician from Camille's case. She had a composed face and clear eyes, the kind of woman who didn't waste words. "I've reviewed the preliminary report," Maria said, tapping her pen against a notepad. "But we'll need to verify documentation and confirm timelines against hospital records." I handed her the USB drive. "This includes everything. The logs, recordings, timestamped messages. And this," I added, sliding across a second folder, "is a letter from Dr. Levitt, who treated me during my last ER visit in May." The attending doctor plugged the drive into a laptop and connected headphones. Maria listened intently as the audio from the brunch began to play. I watched her expression shift, from detached curiosity to stone-faced disbelief. "That wasn't her cup," Maria murmured aloud, quoting Adrian's voice on the recording. She glanced up at me. That's the moment it stopped being speculation. "There's more," I said quietly. In other clips, Adrian and Camille talk openly about adjusting the dosage, timing effects to coincide with client presentations, and preventing me from appearing at launches. Maria turned toward the doctor. "We'll need Camille's toxicology report cross-referenced with Ms. Collins' records from the past year. Prioritize the ER visits in February, March, and May." The doctor nodded. "We've already begun. But there's something you should know. Camille's blood work shows traces of a neurobehavioral compound. Not something we'd expect in any household. It's still in early clinical trials and not legally available." Maria looked back at me. "Do you know where Adrian might have gotten something like that?" I hesitated. He used to be a research assistant during grad school at Emory. One of his old classmates works at a biotech company called Nexaval. They focus on cognition enhancement drugs and behavioral modification compounds. She made a note, then spoke into her radio. "Initiate a workplace search. Collins is employed at Gilston and Varick, Legal Counsel Division." Less than an hour later, confirmation came through. 4 unlabeled vials had been found in Adrian's office desk drawer, each marked only with project code names and dates. One sticky note read, "B. Ensure 3-day delay on Waverly deliverable. Adjust if needed." My stomach turned, but this time it wasn't from fear. It was from clarity. One note read, "Delay Brynn. Waverly handoff must span minimum 72 hours. The words hit me like ice water. Not just an oversight. Not a moment of weakness. This was deliberate, planned sabotage timed to the hour, executed with clinical detachment. I could feel the last remnants of doubt slip away. This wasn't jealousy. It was a campaign. Maria looked up from the file. "We're broadening the inquiry to Nexaval Pharmaceuticals," she said. "If this compound traces back to them, we may be dealing with more than just Adrian and Camille." I nodded mutely, my pulse steady for the first time in days. Just then a nurse stepped into the room, clearing her throat softly. "Miss Collins, Camille's awake. She's asked to speak with you. Alone." I followed her down the hall, past pale walls and antiseptic light. Camille's hospital room was quiet. The machines beside her beeped steadily, her face gaunt but calm, stripped of the vanity and sharpness that once defined her. "I didn't think you'd actually come," she murmured, voice hoarse. "I'm here to hear the truth," I said, staying just inside the doorway. "Not because I care, but because the police do." Camille gave a weak chuckle, but there was no malice left in it. "There's not much more to say. Adrian pushed harder than I ever thought he would. I wanted to slow you down, sure, but I never wanted it to go that far." "You mean you didn't want to face what it would cost when I didn't crumble?" I said quietly. She turned her head toward the window. "He made it sound so easy. A few drops, a skipped meeting, and I'd finally have the room to breathe again." I lost sight of the line between ambition and cruelty. I didn't respond. I didn't need her excuses. "I'll give them everything," Camille added after a pause. "I have an email Adrian sent to a man named Dr. Kessler at Nexaval. He asked for a test formula that impairs cognition without showing up in standard labs. It's still on my laptop. That was all I needed. Not regret. Just proof. I left the room without another word. The path to justice had already begun, and it was gaining momentum. The trial began 3 months later, just as a chilled breeze rolled through Savannah's moss-draped streets. The courthouse was packed. Outside, the golden leaves of early November fluttered across the steps. Inside, the tension was so thick, you could feel it settle into your bones. Adrian and Camille sat at the defense table, no longer the polished pair from weekend parties and company mixers. They looked drained, empty shadows of the people they pretended to be. I sat just behind Simon Barrett, my attorney, flanked by my mother, a few of my team leads, and a representative from Waverly and Company, the client they tried so hard to steal from me. The prosecutor opened with piercing clarity. This is not simply a story of betrayal in a marriage or a corporate rivalry. This is about the premeditated use of unregulated compounds to systematically destroy a woman's ability to work and succeed, because she outperformed them. Then came the evidence. First, the recording from the brunch, Camille's voice cracking under the effects of her own plan. Then the logs, emails, texts. And finally, the damning handwritten note from Adrian. Double the dose. Keep her out until the 19th. Gasps swept through the gallery. But I didn't flinch. Because I knew I was finally being heard. Make sure she's out by the 17th, the prosecutor read aloud, projecting Adrian's handwriting onto the courtroom screen. The room went still. Then came the video I had recorded weeks before the trial, my own words, spoken straight to camera, eyes steady and tone firm. My name is Brynn Collins. Over the last 6 months, I've been hospitalized 3 times. Each time, I drank something handed to me by my husband or my sister-in-law. I thought it was stress. I thought it was exhaustion. But I was being drugged. I watched the playback without flinching. I didn't look at Adrian. I hadn't needed his reaction in a long time. On the second day of testimony, Dr. Levitt, my attending physician from Memorial South, took the stand. He reviewed blood work from my ER visits, each showing the presence of a rare neurobehavioral compound, one that increased in concentration over time. This was not incidental, Dr. Levitt stated clearly. This was deliberate. Someone was adjusting the dose based on the patient's reactions. That demonstrates ongoing observation and intent. The next witness was a representative from Nexaval, the biotech firm connected to Adrian. She stood straight, her voice tight with discomfort. An employee of ours, Dr. Aaron Kessler, has been suspended pending investigation, she explained. We were unaware that any of our test compounds had left our controlled facilities. We are horrified by these revelations. Then the emails were shown, messages between Adrian and Kessler discussing dosage strength, absorption timing, and cognitive delays. In one, Adrian wrote, "If she misses the Richmond launch, it falls to me. Need something stronger this time." The defense tried their spin. They painted Camille as a bystander caught in Adrian's manipulation. They claimed Adrian only wanted his wife to take a break from burnout, that he misjudged the effects. But the courtroom wasn't buying it. The prosecutor leaned forward and spoke with fire. Help her rest? You don't help someone rest by sneaking research chemicals into their breakfast. You don't care for a spouse by planning their absence from high-stakes meetings. That's not concern. That is conspiracy. That is premeditated harm. On the final day, Camille asked to make a statement. She rose slowly, dressed in a muted blue blouse, hands trembling, face pale. I won't deny what happened, she said, voice cracking. I was jealous. I didn't act. And when Adrian went too far, I still said nothing. I didn't want her dead. I just wanted to feel seen again. But I let it go too far. It wasn't apology. It wasn't even regret. It was exhaustion, raw and resigned. Adrian said nothing. He hadn't spoken once throughout the entire trial. When the jury returned, the courtroom held its breath. The judge stood. We have a verdict. Adrian Collins and Camille Renner were found guilty on all counts: conspiracy to inflict bodily harm, unlawful use of controlled substances, and intentional endangerment. The judge's voice didn't waver as the sentence followed. Adrian Collins is hereby sentenced to 18 years in federal prison. Camille Renner is sentenced to 12 years. Neither shall be eligible for probation. Camille broke down in tears, the first visible emotion she had shown since her arrest. Adrian remained hunched forward, head low, expression blank. I didn't feel victorious. I felt free. Like I'd finally stepped out of a nightmare that had been masquerading as a marriage. As they were led away, I whispered, "It's not because I'm stronger than you. It's because I never needed to poison anyone to succeed." 1 year later, I stood beneath the soft amber lights of the Savannah Innovation Forum, a sleek, modern venue overlooking the river. The audience was packed: executives, entrepreneurs, and young professionals from across the Southeast, all gathered for the keynote I'd been invited to deliver. I stepped to the podium in a navy silk blouse, my notes tucked away in the folder I didn't need. "My name is Brynn Collins," I began, my voice calm but unwavering. "And tonight, I want to talk to you about reclaiming your voice after it's been stolen. About the power of truth when silence could have been safer. About surviving what should have broken you and coming out stronger." The room quieted to stillness. "A year ago," I continued, "I walked out of a courtroom not with celebration in my heart, but with a raw, jagged wound. I had been betrayed by the very people I once loved most, my husband and my sister-in-law. Together, they had tried to erase me from my own career, my own future, and nearly succeeded." A flicker of movement caught my eye, someone in the front row setting down their pen, listening intently. "After the trial," I said, "I left the firm where I had built so much. They had supported me through the lawsuit, but I could feel the weight of pity in every glance, the whisper of doubt in every meeting. So when Redmond Pierce Group, the company I almost lost to my husband's scheme, offered me a position as their new director of strategic growth, I didn't hesitate. It had been the smartest move of my life. I didn't retaliate," I said softly. "I never went to the press. I didn't post on social media. I let the facts and the results speak for me. 9 months ago, we closed a $14 million partnership with the wellness brand Vera Plus. 3 months after that, my team was awarded Strategy Team of the Year. And just last week, I was voted onto the National Ethics Advisory Board for Women in Business." Applause rippled through the crowd, but I held my hand still. "People say success is the best revenge," I added, meeting the gaze of a young woman near the stage. "But I disagree. Revenge keeps you chained to the pain. Success, when it's built from integrity, that sets you free." After the talk, backstage, the same young woman approached. She looked no older than 24, nerves in her smile but fire in her eyes. "Excuse me, Ms. Collins," she said, holding out a notepad. "I'm Danielle. I work in product development at a small health tech firm. Your speech, it gave me courage. Real courage." I placed my hand lightly on her shoulder. "Courage isn't waiting until you're ready. It's moving forward anyway. And you already have it." Later that night, I sat on the balcony of my apartment overlooking Forsyth Park, the scent of jasmine on the breeze. I opened my inbox and saw an email from Redmond's legal team. The subject line was simple. Renewal confirmed. Vera Plus or contract, 3-year extension. I leaned back in my chair, tea in hand. Not coffee. Never again. The stars overhead shimmered quietly. I didn't win by fighting fire with fire. I won by staying rooted in who I was even when everything around me was trying to burn me down. And that, I had learned, was the most unshakable kind of power. The email subject line read, "Waverly renewal confirmed, 3-year extension." I sat on the small wrought iron balcony of my apartment overlooking the Savannah River, the water shimmering under a soft wash of moonlight. In my hands was a cup of chamomile tea, warm, calming, and most importantly, brewed by me. No bitterness. No second-guessing. I wasn't afraid of what I was drinking anymore. I wasn't afraid of anything. The air was still, peaceful in a way I hadn't known in years. After everything, after the trial, the silence that followed, and the relentless work, I had arrived at something close to peace. At the bottom of the email, Waverly CEO had written a personal note. "Thank you for standing tall when it would have been easier to fall. You're more than a strategist, you're proof that resilience leads." I didn't know where Adrian or Camille were now. Somewhere behind locked gates, I assumed. Simon had sent me a digital copy of the sentencing file months ago. I'd never opened it. I never would. Because none of that mattered anymore. I didn't need to relive the betrayal. I didn't need to measure my healing by the length of their sentences. I chose not to carry the wreckage of that darkness with me. Instead, I chose clarity. I chose joy. I chose to rebuild my life with no shadows clinging to the edges. That was my victory. That was the evidence that I had won without poison, without malice, without letting vengeance consume me. Brynn Collins' story is a reminder that even in the face of the deepest betrayals, we are not powerless. We can rise. We can protect our peace. And we can come back stronger on our own terms. Because in a world so often clouded by manipulation and deceit, it is still possible to succeed with integrity. What do you think of Brynn's decision? Do you believe walking away from revenge is a form of strength, or would you have chosen a different path? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow this channel for more real stories of courage, truth, and personal transformation.